Hi guys and welcome back to the channel. It's the 36 Gems of Funky, legendary Funk Hero. How are we doing today? If you're a first time listener to this on the channel, I want you to like, comment and subscribe. If you listened before, I'd like you to drop a like, drop a comment, share the love, share this video, share the channel around guys. But without no further ado, let's get into My Hero Academia chapter 310. Now the first page of the chapter, we see a storm is brewing in the city, and we see that there are 3 civilians who are defending themselves against what looks like a monster, but in fact it turns out to be a mutant type quirk user. And this woman, because it's a woman, is of no threat to anyone. She's simply someone who decided to hide out and not evacuate, and she waited to the last minute to do it in the middle of a dark storm. She's come across these civilians who have mistaken her for a villain, and now they're attacking her. Fortunately, as one of them fires what looks like an energy blast at her, Deku speeds in at the last second and deflects the shot. And he tells everyone to calm down because this storm that's brewing, the storm that's going on currently, it's getting everyone's tensions high and making their emotions run wild. But Deku does say that the woman is of no threat to anyone. And like I said, she explained that she was scared. She was scared, so she left out at the last minute in the middle of the night in order to get to an evacuation shelter. But she also mentions how bad things have gotten recently and how she wishes them to go back to normal, to which Deku responds, "I will make it so." Now, another thing I want to quickly mention is the fact that these civilians, their reaction is that while she shouldn't have wandered around in the dark like that, based on how she looks, which, you know, in this day and age is not something you expect to hear, but in the My Hero Academia universe with someone with a mutant type quirk, it's the discrimination based on physical appearance is still a thing. And you would think in a series like that you wouldn't have that anymore, but just goes to show the nature of society and people. And we see a car pull up, a very nice sports car, which we saw last chapter, and it's none other than All Might himself. All Might's turned up in order to help the woman, because obviously from the last chapter, he's Deku's, I don't want to say Alfred, but All Might is essentially his Alfred now. He's the guy in the chair for Deku. He's the one who helps to coordinate him in terms of his heroing and where he needs to be. But All Might's turned up, and Deku has asked All Might to take the young woman to the evacuation shelter because he can't be around anyone. And Deku says fine, but before he goes, he gives him a lunch. All Might has given him a katsu lunch, which Deku responds, "Thank you." And the panel we see, Deku has he's got like the happy classic anime eyes, but All Might tells him to eat it up before it spoils. And the next shot, we see Deku on top of a radio tower, and he's just overlooking the city. But of course, Deku is not alone. We hear someone speaking, and they mention that it's like we've slid back into the darker days, like I mentioned earlier. And this is Daigoro Banjo speaking, one of the users of One for All. He mentions that things aren't the best right now, with Shigaraki, All for One, Dobby, the Nomus, and the League, because the heroes have no leads. Daigoro mentions this. They have no leads. The authorities don't have the manpower to properly round up the escaped convicts. That's why Deku said our best efforts are to at least try to round up the escapees to help thin the herd. Daigoro says the world is easy pickings for the bad guy. And Deku responds to Daigoro, with All for One's quirk transplanted into Shigaraki, he was too strong for us to bring down, even with Endeavor and Aizawa Sensei's help. Unless I draw out One for All's full power, I can't stop any of this. So Deku knows he needs every ounce, every scrap of power in order to defeat Shigaraki with everything he has at his disposal right now. And this is perfect transitioning by Hirokoshi, because the next bit of speech we hear is, "Now play nice, you two. You have to cooperate with our successor." Now this goes back to the events of what happened in My Hero Academia chapter 305, where we see the original user, All for One's younger brother, speaking to the second and third users, telling them he needs your help to unleash his full power. Now, We see Deku in the Vestige world, and we also get the name of All for One's brother, and it is Yoichi. So forgive me if I've mispronounced it, but nonetheless, we see Yoichi, and he is asking the second and third users, "I implore you, my heroes." He's asking them, and they both still have their backs against their faces against the wall, like we saw previously in chapter 305. And the other users are all still watching and waiting for them to react, but it's a moment of silence and a bit of awkwardness. But again, we see Daigo Banjo, and he says, "Kiddo, how about you catch up on some other quirks in the meantime?" Because clearly the second and third users are still not willing to allow Deku to use their quirks for some reason, but they tell us now. And we see the hero with the spiky hair, and it turns out he has a striking similarity to Kirishima in terms of his hairstyle. But he says, "We lived through the harshest era." He continues to say, "The height of All for One's prosperity, an era when his control spread unchecked." But I don't want to forget it. On page 12 to 13, we do see Daigo Banjo say, "It's better for you to work on Shinomori's and En's quirks. That way you can visualize them better when you wake up." Because, as I said, the second and third users are not willing to share their power with Deku just yet. But we see the second and third users' faces now in full view, and it is not Kirishima, and it is not Bakugo like the theory suggested, but we still don't actually get their names in this chapter, and I believe it's because these heroes are still going to play a part in the story. My new theory I have now is that the hero who has the hair similar to Bakugo and what looks like a gauntlet or some sort of like cannon on his arm, I believe that is the hero who inspired Bakugo, because there is a hero Bakugo mentions is an inspiration for him other than All Might. But he doesn't actually specifically mention the hero by name, and it's never implied to be someone like Endeavor or another hero who's currently in the story at the moment. And the third user keeps talking. And the third user, I should say, for clarification, is the one who has the ponytail style haircut. But he says those who are under All for One's control didn't even realize it, but our leader and misgivings about the future. And he continues to say, in order to strike back against All for One's control, he gathered allies and fought. And he's talking about the second user who originally I thought, and a lot of other people thought, could potentially be Bakugo. And we see this user's face in full view, like I said, and he has a scar going across it. Now, I believe this happened when he went to rescue the original user of One for All, because he says, "You were there with me," speaking to the original user. The second user speaking to the first, "You were there with us. You saw it all, Yoichi. You saw it. I sought to bring down your brother and extinguished so many lives in the process." Now, he's talking about trying to take down One for All, so I guess maybe on the attack he took out a lot of All for One's minions, and yeah, I mean, this seems like the story is definitely getting into a darker tone, and I'm loving the feeling of it so far. But like, comment, subscribe, and tell me down below what you guys think of this chapter. But the second user does mention his gripes, and he says, because in our battle, victory meant life and death, and he doesn't want to put his trust in Deku, a boy who wants to save their arch nemesis, someone who's brought so much destruction and death and sorrow and pain to people's lives. Not just the users of One for All, but a lot of people in Japan, in Quirk Society, have been affected by All for One, whether they know it or not. And I think this is perfectly valid on his point, because I'm still on the side that Shigaraki / All for One needs to die. But you guys tell me down below what you think. And the original Yoichi, he's not having this. I mean, he doesn't get angry and shout, but he says, "A ridiculous delusion, such a sad way to see it. Then tell me why on that day." And Yoichi, the original user, talks about how he first came across the second user, and it is when the second user led a raid on one of All For One's hideouts. I guess in order to take him out, he comes across All For One's younger brother and reaches out and saves him that day. Now, Yoichi says, "You knew who I was. You knew my ties to All For One, but yet you still reached out to save me." And Yoichi goes on to say, "Our battle would never have started that day if you hadn't reached out to me in that room." And it seems like All For One had his younger brother trapped in just a dark cell, because all you see is, you don't see anything but the light coming through and the second user in the doorway. So All For One wasn't even that kind to his brother, even though he gave him a quirk. All For One's a bad older brother. I mean, like, if you think All For One's a bad older brother, I think he is. I do want to say that the second user's quirk, we don't find out what it is, but I'm gonna put a guess in and say it's some sort of energy quirk, because like I said, he has a cannon on his arm on it, and he had it aimed when he burst down the door, ready to take down All For One's brother. But Yoichi goes on to say, "Besides, what choice do you have now? You know that this is the only way, which is why you've chosen to appear here in the first place, right?" And the second user, he says, "Can Deku really bring an end to all this?" So this is why he has his doubts in Deku. He doesn't believe Deku can do this, because after all, Deku is he's still just a school kid, a lot younger than all the other users, and still very naive in some ways. I guess in chapter 3 or 5 he is. But Yoichi says yes, he believes that Deku can do it. One for All emerged from the will to resist my brother, but it was on that day when you reached out for me was when All For One was truly born. And that's when we see the second user say, "Listen up, boy, listen up, boy, because things are bound to move very quickly from here on out." So now, and I guess in the flashback from chapter 3 or 5, the second hero he's finally accepted Deku. And from looks like the third user has as well, but we don't get to see what new quirks Deku has unlocked. I mean, you guys comment below what you think Deku's unlocked. I mean, I've made a theory video already about what quirk Deku is going to unlock, but I'd love to hear your guys' suggestions. But yeah, that's my Hero Academia chapter 310, guys. Like, comment, subscribe. Tell me, guys, what you guys thought of the chapter below. I'm the 36 James of Funk, the legendary funk hero. Keep it fresh, keep it funky, and take care, everyone. Goodbye.